Admiral Taewoo Jin stood at the observation window and watched the sky fall apart. The last orbital defense platform, Aegis 7, broke into 1,000 burning pieces. Orange fire spread across the darkness of space like blood in water. He had built that station. He had believed it would protect them. Now it fell toward the Pacific Ocean, and with it fell the last shield between Earth and death. Behind him, the command center was silent. Officers stood at their stations, but no one moved. No one spoke. What was there to say? They had fought for 3 years. They had given everything. And still the Voral came. The Voral Dominion had arrived without warning. Their ships appeared near Jupiter, a fleet so large it blocked out the stars. Humanity sent messages of peace. The Voral sent back only one reply. You have built homes on sacred ground. For this crime, you will be erased. Humanity had not understood at first. Sacred ground? They had colonized distant worlds, yes, small colonies on planets that seemed empty and lifeless. But to the Voral, these worlds were holy, places where their species was born in ancient times, places where no other foot should ever walk. So they came to kill every human, not to conquer, not to enslave, simply to end. Woojin turned away from the window. His face was lined with age and grief. 2 years ago, he lost his eldest son at the Battle of Mars. 6 months later, his younger son died defending the colonies near Saturn. His wife had passed before the war, a small mercy. She did not have to see their children burn. Sir, said a young officer. His voice shook. Aegis 7 is gone. We have nothing left in orbit. I know, Woojin said. His voice was calm, tired but calm. What is the status of the enemy fleet? 3,000 ships, sir. They are moving into bombardment position. They will be ready within 72 hours. 3,000 ships. Humanity had started the war with 200. Now they had perhaps 30, scattered and hiding in the asteroid belt. It was not a fleet. It was barely a memory. On the surface below, the cities were emptying. For 3 years, humanity had prepared for this moment. They knew the orbital defenses might fall. They knew the enemy might win. So they built the havens, massive underground shelters, carved deep into the earth. Millions of people now fled into these dark tunnels, hoping the planet itself would protect them. In Seoul, Ground Commander Park Soo-ah directed the evacuation. She stood at the entrance to Haven 12, watching endless lines of people stream past. Old men carried children. Mothers held babies close. Young people helped the elderly down the long stairs into the earth. Soo-ah had been a teacher before the war. She taught history to middle school students. She told them stories of ancient battles, of kingdoms that rose and fell, of heroes who fought against impossible odds. She never imagined she would become one of those stories. Now she wore a soldier's uniform. A rifle hung from her shoulder. Her hands, which once held chalk and books, now held weapons. She had killed Voral soldiers in ground combat. She had watched friends die. She had become something she never wanted to be. Commander, said one of her soldiers, the last transport is arriving. After this, we seal the doors. Soo-ah nodded. Make sure everyone gets inside, no one gets left behind. She looked up at the sky. Even in daylight, she could see the faint lights of the Voral fleet. They hung there like evil stars, waiting. Soon they would rain fire down upon the earth. Soon the surface would burn. But the havens would survive. That was the hope. That was all the hope they had left. Far away, on Jeju Island, something else was happening. Beneath Mount Hala, hidden from all satellites and sensors, a secret facility hummed with desperate energy. Scientists ran through corridors, shouting orders and checking equipment. Screens displayed numbers and graphs that only a few people in the world could understand. Dr. Kang Jin-ho stood at the center of this chaos. He was a thin man with gray hair and tired eyes. For 20 years, he had worked on Project Homefall. For 20 years, he had hoped it would never be needed. Now it was needed. How much time do we have? He asked. His assistant, Choi Yuna, checked her tablet. 72 hours until bombardment. Maybe less if they decide to move early. Kang nodded slowly. Then we must work faster. Project Homefall was humanity's darkest secret. It began 50 years ago, when scientists first detected signals from other civilizations in the galaxy. The government had kept this discovery hidden. They studied the signals. They learned that the universe was full of life, and that most of it was dangerous. So they began to prepare. Not for contact, not for friendship, for survival. They modified the Earth's core. They installed graviton drives deep beneath the surface. They weaponized the magnetic field itself. They turned the entire planet into something that had never existed before. A weapon of last resort. The idea was simple but terrifying. If all else failed, if humanity faced total extinction, they would not die quietly. They would fight with the only weapon large enough to matter. They would fight with their home. Kang looked at the screens showing the Voral fleet. 3,000 ships, ready to burn the Earth clean of human life. They thought they were hunting helpless prey. They thought this would be easy. They were wrong. In orbit, the Voral High Commander stood on his bridge and looked down at the blue planet. His name was Tyrek, and he had destroyed 12 species in his career. Humanity would be the 13th. He felt nothing special about this. The humans were just another infestation to be cleaned. They had spread to sacred worlds. They had defiled holy ground. Now they would pay the price that all such vermin paid. His communication officer approached. "High Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface." "Let me hear it." The message played. It was a human leader, a woman with a tired face and hard eyes. She spoke in their translated language. "People of the Voral Dominion, we did not know your sacred places. We meant no offense. But you have come to kill our children, our families, our entire species. Know this, we will not beg. We will not surrender. And if you think you know what we are capable of, you are wrong. You have never faced an enemy like humanity. And when the fire comes, it will not only burn us." Tyrek laughed. Empty threats from a dying species. He had heard such words before. They meant nothing. He gave the order to continue the approach. In 72 hours, Earth would burn. He did not know that beneath the surface, the planet itself was waking up. 48 hours remained before the Voral would begin their bombardment. 48 hours until fire fell from the sky and turned the surface of Earth into ash and glass. In the haven beneath Geneva, the leaders of humanity gathered for what might be their final meeting. President Yoon Hana sat at the head of the long table. She was 60 years old, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much death. Before the war, she had been a diplomat. She believed in peace. She believed that any problem could be solved with words and patience and understanding. The Voral had taught her otherwise. Around the table sat generals and admirals, scientists and ministers. They represented every nation on Earth. Old enemies sat beside old friends. The war had erased the borders between countries. Now there was only humanity, united by the threat of extinction. "What are our options?" Hana asked. Her voice was steady, but everyone could hear the weight behind it. Admiral Tae Woo-jin spoke first. "We have 37 ships remaining. Most are damaged. Even if we attack with everything we have, we cannot break through their shields. Their technology is simply too advanced." "What about nuclear weapons?" asked a general from the European sector. "We still have thousands of warheads. If we launch them all at once." "It will not work," Woojin interrupted. "We tried nuclear weapons in the first year of the war. Their shields absorbed everything. We could detonate every warhead on Earth beneath their fleet, and they would not feel more than a warm breeze." Silence fell over the room. Everyone knew this already. They had simply hoped that someone might have a different answer. Hana closed her eyes. She thought of her daughter, hiding somewhere in the Haven network. She thought of her granddaughter, only 3 years old, who did not understand why everyone was so afraid. She thought of all the children on Earth, millions of them, all facing death because their species had committed a crime it did not know was a crime. Then we have no military options, she said quietly. There is one. The voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned to look. Dr. Kang Jin-ho stood there, looking like a man who had not slept in weeks. Because he had not. Who are you? Demanded a general. Let him speak, Hana said. She recognized the name from classified reports. Project Homefall. The project so secret that even most government leaders did not know its true purpose. Kang walked to the front of the room. His hands were shaking, but his voice was clear. My name is Dr. Kang Jin-ho. For 20 years, I have led a project called Homefall. It was created because we always knew this day might come. The day when humanity faced an enemy we could not defeat by normal means. He pressed a button, and a hologram appeared above the table. It showed the Earth, but with strange structures hidden beneath the surface. Lines of energy connected the core to the crust. Massive devices sat buried beneath mountains and oceans. 50 years ago, we began modifying our planet, Kang continued. We installed graviton drives near the core. We weaponized the magnetic field. We turned Earth itself into a warship. The room erupted in shocked voices. Impossible. Insane. How could they not know about this? Kang waited for the noise to die down. The project was kept secret because we hoped it would never be needed. The technology is dangerous. Activating it will cause massive destruction on the surface. Earthquakes, floods, millions will die from the transition alone. Millions? Someone whispered. Yes, but if we do nothing, billions will die. Everyone will die. The Vorl do not want prisoners. They want extinction. Admiral Tay leaned forward. What exactly can this weapon do? Kang changed the hologram. Now, it showed the Earth moving through space, chasing the Vorl fleet. We can move the planet. We can accelerate it toward the enemy fleet. We can use the magnetic field as a weapon, sending electromagnetic storms that will destroy their electronics. We can fire pieces of our own mantle as projectiles, accelerated to incredible speeds. He paused. We can make them pay for what they plan to do to us. President Hana stared at the hologram. Her mind struggled to understand what she was seeing. The entire Earth turned into a weapon. The entire planet falling upon its enemies like a fist from the heavens. The damage to the surface, she said slowly. Can people survive? In the havens, yes. We designed them to withstand the stresses of planetary movement. The surface will be devastated, but the underground shelters will hold. Perhaps 60% of humanity will survive the activation. And the other 40%? Kang met her eyes. They will die so that the rest may live. So that our species may continue. So that the Vorl learn that humanity does not die quietly. The room fell silent again. This was not a military decision. This was something else entirely. This was choosing to sacrifice millions so that billions might survive. This was turning their home, the only home humanity had ever known, into an instrument of war. Hana stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the tunnels of the haven filled with people. Families huddled together. Children played games, not understanding the danger. Old people told stories of the surface they might never see again. If we do this, she said without turning around, we become something different. We become a species that destroyed its own world to win a war. We become a species that survived, Kang replied. That is what matters. Hana thought of her granddaughter, 3 years old, a whole life ahead of her if there was a future to live in. She turned back to the room. Her eyes were hard now. The diplomat was gone. In her place stood something older and more dangerous, a mother protecting her children, a species refusing to die. How long do you need to prepare, she asked. 12 hours, Kang said. Then we can activate. Then do it. Prepare the system. She looked around the table at the shocked faces. This is my order as President of the United Earth Council. We activate Project Homefall. Madam President, an advisor said carefully, should we not vote on this? Such a decision. There is no time for votes, Hana interrupted. There is no time for debate. In 48 hours, we die or we fight. I choose to fight. She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at the gathered leaders. Prepare a broadcast. Tell every person on Earth what is about to happen. Tell them to reach the deepest havens they can find. Tell them. She paused, searching for words. Tell them that their home is about to save them. And tell them to hold on. As she left the room, Admiral Tay caught up with her. Madam President, are you certain about this? Hana looked at him. In his eyes, she saw the same exhaustion she felt, the same grief, the same desperate, burning need to protect what remained of their people. They came to erase us from the universe, she said quietly. They wanted us to die in silence and despair. I will not give them that satisfaction. Her voice hardened. Let them learn why the universe should fear us. Let them learn what happens when you push humanity to the edge. She continued walking. Behind her, the leaders of Earth began to understand what was about to happen. The last hope of victory through normal means had died. But from its death, something new was rising. Something terrible. Something magnificent. Earth was about to fight back. The announcement went out to every haven, every shelter, every radio and screen, still working on Earth. President Yoon Hana's face appeared, tired but determined, and she told humanity the truth. My fellow humans, she began, in 12 hours, we will activate a weapon that has been prepared for 50 years. This weapon is our planet itself. We will use the Earth to fight back against the Voral fleet. She paused, and everyone watching could see the weight of what she was about to say. This will not be gentle. The surface will change. There will be earthquakes and floods. Many will die. But if we do nothing, everyone will die. Every child, every family, every memory of what humanity was and could have been. I will not allow that. We will not allow that. The broadcast continued, explaining what people should do. Get to the deepest havens. Hold on to something. Prepare for the worst. And when it was over, emerge into a new world. In Haven 12, beneath Seoul, Park Soo-ah gathered her soldiers and the civilians under her protection. They sat in a massive underground chamber, thousands of people pressed together. The air was thick with fear and the smell of too many bodies in too small a space. A little girl tugged at Soo-ah's sleeve. Are we gonna be okay? Soo-ah looked down at her. The girl reminded her of her students, back when she was a teacher, back when the world made sense. Yes, she said, though she did not know if it was true. We are going to be okay. Just stay close to your mother and hold on tight when the shaking starts. The girl nodded and ran back to her family. Soo-ah watched her go and felt something twist in her chest. How many children would not survive the next 12 hours? How many families would be torn apart? But how many would survive if they did nothing? None. That was the answer. None. Far above, on the surface, not everyone had made it to the havens. Some had been too far away. Some had refused to go underground, preferring to die under open sky. And some had chosen to stay at their posts until the very end. Soldier Lee Dong-min was one of these. He sat at his observation station in the mountains of eastern Korea, watching the sky through sensors and cameras. His job was to track the Voral fleet, to report their movements, to give warning if they attacked early. He knew he would not survive the activation. The station was on the surface, exposed. When Project Homefall activated, the earthquakes alone would kill him. But someone had to watch. Someone had to warn the others if the enemy moved. So he stayed. In the quiet hours of his last night, Dong-min recorded a message on his personal device. He hoped someone would find it someday. He hoped his daughter would hear his voice, even if she could not remember his face. Mira, he said to the camera, by the time you see this, I will be gone. I am sorry I could not be there to watch you grow up. I am sorry I could not teach you to ride a bicycle or help you with your homework, or walk you down the aisle at your wedding." He paused, struggling with his emotions. "But I want you to know that I stayed because I love you. I stayed so that you might have a future. Everything I did, every moment of this war was for you. Remember that. And when you look up at the sky, know that your father helped save it." He ended the recording and sat back. Outside, the stars were beautiful. Among them, barely visible, were the lights of the enemy fleet. Soon, those lights would fall. Beneath Mount Hala, Dr. Kang Jin-ho ran final checks on the systems. Everything was ready. The graviton drives hummed with power. The magnetic field generators stood ready to fire. The weapons, hidden beneath oceans and mountains, waited for the signal. His assistant, Choi Yuna, approached with a tablet in her hands. Her face was pale. "Doctor," she said quietly, "I found something in the calculations." Kang looked at her. "What is it?" "The stress on the planet's structure. We always knew it would be dangerous, but I ran the numbers again, and..." She handed him the tablet. "There is a possibility that the activation will tear the planet apart entirely. Not just surface damage, complete destruction." Kang studied the numbers. His heart sank. She was right. The calculations showed a 15% chance of total planetary destruction. Not survival, not victory. Just an Earth-sized cloud of debris floating in space. "How did we miss this?" he asked. "The original calculations were done decades ago. Our technology has improved since then. More precise measurements show that the core is more unstable than we thought." Kang set down the tablet. He walked to the window that looked out over the control room, where hundreds of technicians worked frantically to prepare for activation. "If we tell them," he said slowly, "they will want to cancel the operation. Some will argue that a 15% chance of destruction is too high." "Is it not?" Yuna asked. Kang turned to face her. "What is the alternative? If we do nothing, the Voral will bomb the surface. Everyone in the havens will eventually die from starvation, from Voral ground troops, from 1,000 different causes. The chance of extinction is not 15%. It is 100%. He placed his hand on her shoulder. "We roll the dice, Yuna. We take the chance. Because even if we fail, even if the Earth breaks apart, we die free. We die fighting. That is more than they intended to give us." Yuna looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "I understand." "Good. Delete those calculations. No one else needs to know." She hesitated, then did as he asked. Some secrets were too heavy to share. In the havens around the world, the final hours passed slowly. People held each other, strangers became friends, old enemies embraced. A man who had spent his life hating a neighbor now held that neighbor's child while the mother slept. A woman who had never forgiven her brother called him and said the words she had waited 20 years to say. Humanity, facing its end, discovered what it truly valued. Not money, not power, not all the things they had fought over for thousands of years, just each other. Just the simple fact of being alive together. In Haven 7 beneath Tokyo, an old man played a violin. The music echoed through the tunnels, sad and beautiful. People stopped to listen. Some wept. The song spoke of everything they were about to lose and everything they were fighting to keep. At his observation post, Lee Dongmin watched his screens. The Voral fleet was moving, beginning its descent toward the planet. They were coming to watch humanity die. They wanted to see it up close. He activated his communication link. His voice was calm. "Control, this is Observation Post 7. The enemy fleet has begun final approach. All ships descending toward Earth. They will be in range within 30 minutes. He paused, then added, "They are coming down, all of them. They want to watch us die up close." In the command center, beneath Mount Hala, Admiral Tay received the message. He looked at Dr. Kang. "They're coming," he said. Kang nodded. "Then it is time." President Yoon Hana's voice came over the communication system. "All stations, this is the president. Begin activation sequence." Across the planet, technicians entered codes and pressed buttons. Deep beneath the surface, ancient machines began to wake. The graviton drives started their ignition sequence. The magnetic field generators charged. In the havens, people felt a vibration, soft at first, like a distant heartbeat, then stronger. The walls began to hum, the ground began to shake. Li Dongmin watched the sky light up with strange energies. He smiled. He was not afraid anymore. His last transmission was simple. Activation confirmed. Homefall is live. Then the Earth began to move. Every human being on Earth felt it at the same moment. A vibration that started deep in their bones and spread through their entire bodies. It was not like an earthquake. It was something else, something deeper, something that felt almost alive. In the havens, people grabbed onto walls and each other. The lights flickered. The ground moved beneath their feet, but not in the way ground usually moved. This was different. This was intentional. In Haven 12, Park Sua held onto a support beam and watched the ceiling. Dust fell from cracks that had not existed moments ago. Around her, people screamed and prayed and called out for loved ones. But the haven held. The walls groaned but did not break. The engineers had done their job well. Far beneath her feet, the graviton drives activated fully. These machines were the size of cities, buried deep in the planet's mantle. They generated fields of artificial gravity, so powerful that they could move worlds. And now, for the first time in 50 years, they were working at full power. The Earth moved. Not much at first, a gentle acceleration, barely noticeable. But the planet was enormous, and even a tiny change in its motion was something spectacular. In orbit, satellites tumbled out of control. The moon's orbit began to shift, and the Voral fleet, descending toward the surface they thought was helpless, suddenly found their calculations were wrong. On his flagship, High Commander Tyrek stared at his screens in disbelief. What is happening? His navigation officer was sweating. The planet, High Commander. It is accelerating toward us. That is impossible. Yes, High Commander, but it is happening. Tyrek watched as the blue planet below them began to move faster. It was not much, barely a fraction of what his ships could do. But planets did not move. Planets did not chase fleets. This was against every law of nature he knew. Then, the magnetic field struck. Earth's magnetic field had always been a wonder of nature. It protected the surface from solar radiation. It allowed life to exist. But now it had been weaponized. The field inverted, then expanded outward in a massive electromagnetic pulse. The wave hit the Voral fleet like a hammer. Shields flickered. Computers crashed. Ships that had survived battles across 100 worlds suddenly went dark. Their electronics scrambled by a force they had never faced before. In the command center beneath Mount Hala, Admiral Tay watched the chaos spread through the enemy fleet. For the first time in 3 years, he smiled. "They're confused," he said. "Their systems are failing." Dr. Kang nodded, but his eyes were fixed on other screens. Screens that showed the damage on Earth's surface. Mountains were cracking, coastlines were changing. The stress of moving an entire planet was tearing the surface apart. "The havens are holding," reported an officer. "Structural integrity at acceptable levels." Acceptable. Kang hated that word. It meant people were dying, millions of them, but not billions. That was the calculation they had made. Millions to save billions. In the haven beneath Seoul, Park Sua felt the shaking grow stronger. The little girl who had spoken to her earlier was crying, held tight by her mother. Everyone was afraid, but no one was running, because there was nowhere to run to. Then the weapons fired. Across the planet, hidden silos opened, but these did not contain missiles or nuclear warheads. They contained something far more devastating. Chunks of Earth's own mantle, superheated and dense, accelerated by graviton technology to unbelievable speeds. These projectiles shot into space like bullets from a gun the size of a world. Each one was the size of a small mountain. Each one traveled at nearly half the speed of light, and each one carried the fury of a dying planet. The first projectile struck a Voral battleship and passed through it without slowing down. The ship did not explode, it simply ceased to exist, vaporized by the impact. The projectile continued onward, striking 2 more ships before finally losing momentum. More projectiles followed, hundreds of them, thousands. The sky above Earth became a storm of fire and fury. On the Voral flagship, Tyrek screamed orders. Retreat! All ships retreat! But it was too late for many. The electromagnetic pulse had disabled their engines. They hung in space, helpless, as mountains fell upon them from the planet below. Admiral Tay gave his own orders. All batteries, all weapons. Fire everything. The remaining orbital weapons activated. Railguns hidden on the surface fired upward. Laser arrays that had been saved for this moment burned bright. Every weapon humanity had left poured its fury into the enemy fleet. Dr. Kang watched the screens and wept, not from sorrow, but from a strange and terrible awe. He had built this weapon, he had hoped it would never be used, but now that it was activated, now that he saw what humanity could do when pushed to the edge, he understood something about his species that he had never understood before. They were not just survivors. They were fighters. They were a species that, when faced with extinction, did not beg for mercy. They turned their own home into a fist and struck back. In orbit, the Voral fleet was dying. Ships exploded. Debris filled the space around Earth. The beautiful formations that had seemed so invincible now scattered and burned. High Commander Tyrek finally managed to restore partial power to his flagship. He looked at the tactical display and felt something he had never felt before in his long career of destruction: fear. The planet was still accelerating. It was chasing them. It was not just defending itself, it was pursuing, hunting, destroying everything in its path. What are they? He whispered. His second in command had no answer. No species in Voral history had ever done anything like this. No species had ever turned a planet into a weapon. No species had ever been so desperate, so determined, so utterly refusing to die. A warning flashed on Tyrek's screen. A projectile was approaching his ship, one of those chunks of planetary mantle fired from the surface of Earth. He tried to move his ship. The engines responded weakly, still recovering from the electromagnetic pulse. It was not enough. The last thing Tyrek saw was the reading on his screen identifying the projectile. Fragment 227, composed primarily of materials from a mountain range in Central Asia. The humans called those mountains the Himalayas. Their highest peak was named Everest. A piece of Everest struck Tyrek's flagship at half the speed of light. The ship disappeared in a flash of light so bright it was visible from Earth's surface. In the command center, Admiral Tay received the report. Enemy flagship destroyed, sir. Their fleet is in full retreat. We're showing approximately 2,000 confirmed kills. 2,000 ships, more than half the fleet that had come to destroy humanity, gone in less than an hour. But Tay did not celebrate. He looked at other screens, the ones showing Earth's surface. Coastlines had moved, mountains had collapsed, entire regions were underwater or burning or simply gone. The planet they were saving was being transformed into something new. What have we become? He asked quietly. Dr. Kang heard him. We have become survivors, Admiral. Whatever else happens, remember that. We survived. Above them, the Earth continued its impossible journey through space. Below, in the havens, millions of people held on and prayed. And, in the darkness of space, the remaining Voral ships fled from a planet that had awoken and found it had claws. The battle was not over. The Voral fleet had been cut in half, but more than 1,000 ships remained. They were running now. their engines pushing them away from the pursuing planet. But they were also regrouping their commanders, trying to understand what had happened and how to fight back. And reinforcements were coming. From the outer reaches of the solar system, 300 more Voral warships approached at maximum speed. They had been stationed near Neptune, waiting in reserve. Now they received the desperate calls from their fleeing brothers and accelerated toward Earth. In the command center beneath Mount Hala, Admiral Tay studied the tactical display. The planet was still moving, still chasing the retreating fleet, but it was slowing down. The graviton drives were not designed for long pursuits. They had given everything they had in that first terrible charge. "How much power do we have left?" he asked. Dr. Kang checked the readings. "The main drives are at 30%. We can maintain current velocity, but we cannot accelerate further. And the weapon systems are recharging. It will be 2 hours before we can fire another mantle barrage. 2 hours. The reinforcement fleet would arrive in 90 minutes. "We need to buy time," Tay said. "Ground Commander Park, what is the status of the surface weapons?" Park Sua's voice came over the communication system. She had left Haven 12 and was now on the surface, leading teams of soldiers to activate the secondary weapon systems. These were the continent-spanning railguns, massive devices that fired projectiles through the planet itself, using the core as a barrel. "We are activating the Pacific Array now," she reported. 30 minutes to full power. "Make it 20, Tay ordered. "Yes, sir." On the transformed surface of Earth, Sua ran through a landscape that no longer looked like home. The sky was orange and red, filled with debris and strange lights. The ground was cracked and smoking. In the distance, what had once been a mountain range was now a flat plain, compressed by the forces of planetary movement. But she did not stop to look. There was no time for wonder or grief. There was only the mission. Her team reached the control station for the Pacific Array. It was built into the side of a cliff, protected by layers of armor and rock. Inside, technicians worked frantically to bring the ancient weapon online. "Status?" Sua demanded. "Power is flowing. We are aligned with the enemy fleet. But sir, the targeting systems are damaged. We will have to fire manually." Sua nodded. Manual targeting. That meant someone would have to stay at the controls while the weapon fired. And when a railgun this size fired, the electromagnetic backwash would kill anyone nearby. She looked at her team. They were soldiers, all of them. They had volunteered for this mission, knowing it might be their last. "I will do it," she said. "Commander, no. That is an order." Her voice left no room for argument. "Get the weapon ready. I will handle the targeting." Meanwhile, in orbit, the survivors of the Voral fleet were making a desperate stand. They had reformed into a defensive formation, trying to protect their damaged ships while waiting for reinforcements. Young pilot Bei Sung led the remnants of Earth's fighter wings against them. She had started the war with 200 pilots under her command. Now she had 17. "All fighters, form up on me," she said through her communicator. "We need to break their formation before the reinforcements arrive. Hit their command ships first." "Ma'am, we're outnumbered 100 to 1, said one of her pilots. "Then each of us needs to kill 100, Sung replied. "Let's go." The fighters streaked toward the Voral formation. They were tiny compared to the massive warships, but they were fast and hard to hit. And they carried weapons that could hurt even large vessels if aimed at the right places. Seung's fighter dove toward a Voral cruiser. Its defensive guns tracked her, filling the space around her with deadly fire. She twisted and rolled, dodging by inches. A shot grazed her wing. Another nearly hit her cockpit. Then she was through the defensive screen. She fired her missiles directly into the cruiser's engine section. The ship shuddered, then exploded. One down, 99 to go. Around her, her pilots fought and died. She watched their signals disappear from her display, one by one. Each loss was a name she knew, a face she remembered. But she could not stop. She could not mourn. Not yet. On the surface, Park Soo-ah settled into the targeting chair. The weapon hummed around her, building power. On her screen, she could see the Voral formation. She could see exactly where to aim for maximum damage. "Commander," said one of her soldiers, "it has been an honor." Soo-ah smiled sadly. "Get out of here, all of you. Get to minimum safe distance." They saluted and left. She was alone now, in a chamber that would become her tomb. She thought of the little girl in the haven, the one who had asked if they would be okay. She hoped the answer was yes. She hoped that someday that girl would grow up in a world without fear of the Voral. The weapon reached full power. Soo-ah took aim. "This is for everyone we lost," she whispered. Then she fired. The railgun activated. A projectile the size of a building shot through the planet's core, emerging from the other side of Earth at incredible speed. It crossed the void of space in seconds and struck the center of the Voral formation. The explosion was visible from the surface. Ships scattered. The formation broke apart. In her fighter, Bae-sung saw the opportunity. All fighters, press the attack. Now. The surviving pilots dove into the chaos. They fired everything they had. More Voral ships died. But then the reinforcements arrived. 300 fresh warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly behind Earth. They began firing immediately, targeting the weapon arrays on the surface. "We have incoming," shouted a technician in the command center. "Reinforcement fleet is attacking from behind." Admiral Tae made a split-second decision. Activate the lunar defense grid. The moon, Earth's ancient companion, had been modified along with its parent planet. Not as extensively, but enough. Graviton drives pushed it out of its normal orbit, positioning it between Earth and the attacking fleet. The Voral ships found themselves facing a wall of rock 4,000 kilometers wide. Their weapons fired, but the moon absorbed the damage. It was not a warship, it was a shield, and it was buying Earth time. In the control station on Earth's surface, Park Soo-ah was still alive. The electromagnetic backwash had been severe, but not instantly fatal. She was burned and bleeding, her body broken, but she was alive. With shaking hands, she activated the targeting system again. The weapon was recharging, slowly. Too slowly. She looked at her display. More Voral ships were dying. The formation was in chaos. But there were still so many. Too many. "Come on," she whispered to the weapon. "Come on." The power levels climbed. 50%, 60, 70. A Voral strike hit the cliff above her station. The ceiling cracked. Rock began to fall. 80%, 90. Soo-ah smiled. She thought of her students long ago. She thought of the stories she used to tell them about heroes who fought against impossible odds. Now she was one of those heroes. 100%. She fired again. The projectile screamed through space and struck the Voral reinforcement fleet's flagship. The ship exploded, taking 3 others with it. Park Soo-ah did not see the result. The ceiling collapsed before the display updated. She died in darkness, but she died fighting. In orbit, Bae-sung watched the enemy flagship explode. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "All fighters, the surface battery got the flagship. Press the attack. We're winning." 3 of her pilots remained. They followed her into the chaos, firing until their weapons were empty. The Voral retreat became a rout. Ships that had traveled across the galaxy to exterminate humanity now fled in panic from a planet that refused to die. When it was over, the displays showed the final count. Of 3,000 Voral ships, 17 had survived to escape. The rest were debris, scattered across the space between Earth and Mars. Humanity had won. But as Admiral Tae looked at the cost list of dead, the destroyed cities, the transformed planet, he wondered if one was the right word. They had survived. That would have to be enough. 2 days after the battle, the Earth finally stopped moving. The graviton drives had burned out, their massive power cells drained by the effort of pushing an entire planet through space. The moon drifted back toward a stable orbit, its surface scarred by Voral weapons fire, but intact. When scientists calculated Earth's new position, they found it orbiting between Mars and Jupiter. The planet had traveled millions of kilometers during the battle. It would never return to its original place in the solar system. The sun looked smaller now. The days were darker. The temperature had already begun to drop. But humanity was alive. In the havens beneath the ruined surface, survivors slowly emerged. They climbed through broken tunnels and cracked doorways, stepping out onto a world they no longer recognized. The first thing they noticed was the sky. It was wrong. The blue they had known all their lives was now a deeper shade, almost purple. The clouds moved in patterns that made no sense. Strange lights flickered near the horizon, remnants of the electromagnetic storms that had helped win the battle. The second thing they noticed was the silence. The birds were gone, the insects were gone, the constant background noise of life on Earth had been replaced by wind and settling rock. President Yoon Hana stood at the entrance to Haven 1 beneath Geneva. She looked out at a landscape of ash and broken stone. Somewhere under this destruction was the city she had grown up in, her childhood home, the streets where she had played as a girl, all gone. Madam President, an aide approached carefully. We have received reports from around the world. Approximately 3 billion people survived in the havens. Another 2 billion on the surface, mostly in areas that were less affected by the seismic activity. 5 billion survivors, out of 9 billion who had lived on Earth before the activation. 4 billion dead, the price of defiance. Hana closed her eyes. She had given the order. She had chosen to sacrifice millions to save billions. And she had succeeded, the math said so. But math did not comfort the children crying for parents who would never return. Math did not help the man digging through rubble looking for his wife. What about the enemy? She asked. 17 ships escaped. They are currently fleeing toward the edge of the solar system. We believe they will report to the Voral Dominion about what happened here. Good, Hana said quietly. Let them report. Let every civilization in the galaxy know what we did. Let them understand what happens when you try to erase humanity. In the medical ward of the facility beneath Mount Hala, Dr. Kang Jin-ho lay in a bed surrounded by machines. The radiation exposure he had received during the activation was killing him. Slowly, painfully, inevitably. Choi Yuna sat beside him, holding his hand. She had stayed with him through the battle, through the chaos, through the long hours of waiting to learn if the planet would hold together. Now she stayed as he died. We did it, Kang said. His voice was barely a whisper. The planet held. Yes, Yuna said. The calculations were wrong. We got lucky. Kang shook his head slightly. Not luck, faith. I had faith that the Earth would not betray us. It was our home. It fought for us. Yuna did not know what to say to that. It sounded like madness. But then again, moving a planet to fight a war also sounded like madness. Perhaps madness was what survival required. What happens now? She asked. Now you continue my work. Project New Dawn, the next phase. If we can move one planet, we can move others. Humanity does not have to be tied to any single world ever again. He coughed weakly. We can become something new, something that cannot be cornered, cannot be exterminated. I understand. Kang squeezed her hand. Tell them it was worth it, Yuna. Tell them we chose how we died, and that is why we lived. His eyes closed. His grip relaxed. The machines around him began to wail. Choi Yuna sat with him for a long time after the doctors declared him dead. She thought about his words. She thought about the billions who had died and the billions who had survived. She thought about what humanity had become. Then she stood up, wiped her eyes, and went back to work. Across the transformed Earth, survivors were doing the same thing. They mourned, and then they rebuilt. There was no other choice. The world had changed, but the human spirit had not. Massive solar collectors were deployed to capture what warmth they could from the distant sun. Atmospheric generators pumped greenhouse gases into the air, trying to trap heat. Agricultural domes rose from the ruins, creating controlled environments where crops could grow. It would take generations to fully rebuild, but humanity had generations now. The Vorl had meant to give them nothing. In space, word of the Battle of Earth spread. It traveled faster than any ship could carry it, passed from civilization to civilization across a galaxy that had barely noticed humanity before. They noticed now. The Galactic Council, a gathering of the 100 most powerful species in the known universe, convened an emergency session. For the first time in 10,000 years, the agenda contained only one item: the human question. They moved their planet, said the representative of the Morath. They accelerated an entire world and used it as a weapon. This is unprecedented. This is insane, said the Volar representative. Such technology should not be possible for such a young species. Yet they did it, said another. They faced extinction and chose to fight with their home itself. What does this say about them? The debate raged for hours. Some wanted to destroy humanity before they became a greater threat. Others wanted to welcome them as allies. Others simply wanted to stay as far away from them as possible. In the end, they reached a decision born not from welcome, but from fear. Humanity would be granted full membership in the Galactic Council. Their territory would be respected. Their ships would be given free passage. No one wanted to be the next species to push humans to the edge. President Yunhana received the message in the rebuilt communication center beneath what had once been Geneva. She read the formal acceptance, the careful diplomatic language that tried to hide the terror behind it. She drafted her response. To the Galactic Council and all civilizations of the known universe, we, the people of Earth, accept your offer of membership. We did not want this war. We did not ask for extinction. But understand this, we are the species that moved our own world to survive. We turned our home into a weapon because we had no other choice. We will never seek war. We will never strike first. But if anyone threatens our children, our families, our right to exist, they will face the same answer the Vorl faced. She paused, considering her next words carefully. We are humans. We are what happens when a species loves its home enough to fight with it. Cross us again, and we will not stop at moving one planet. She sent the message. It was a threat and a promise and a warning all at once. Across the galaxy, civilizations received it. They read it, and they understood. Humanity was no longer prey. 1 year had passed since the Earth fell armed from the heavens. The planet still orbited in its strange new position between Mars and Jupiter. The sun was smaller and the days were colder, but massive solar collectors and atmospheric engineering kept the surface warm enough for life. Cities rose from the ruins. Children played in parks again. People fell in love and started families, and argued about things that did not matter, and laughed at jokes, and did all the small, beautiful things that living creatures do. Humanity had survived. More than that, humanity had begun to thrive. Admiral Tae Woo-jin stood at the window of the new Earth Defense Command, built into the side of a mountain that had not existed before the activation. He was older now, his hair completely gray, his face carved with lines of exhaustion that would never fully fade. But his eyes were sharp. His spirit was unbroken. He looked out at the sky, at the scattered stars that were visible even during the day now. Among those stars, he knew civilizations watched. They waited to see what humanity would do next. Would the species that had moved a planet become conquerors? Would they seek revenge for what the Vorl had tried to do? The answer was no. Humanity had not survived extinction to become the monsters their enemies expected. They wanted peace. They wanted trade. They wanted to explore and learn and grow. But they would never forget what they had been forced to do. And they would never let themselves be vulnerable again. The rebuilt Earth fleet numbered 50 ships now. Small compared to the old forces, but these were not the fragile vessels of before. Each one carried graviton technology derived from Project Homefall. Each one could accelerate to speeds that would have been impossible before the war. Commander Bei Sung led this fleet. The young pilot who had survived the final battle with only 3 fighters now commanded humanity's entire space force. She had earned the position through courage and sacrifice, and the terrible wisdom that comes from watching friends die. She visited Admiral Tay often. They spoke of the old days, of the battles they had fought, of the people they had lost. They spoke of the future, of the colonies they were planning on, other worlds, of the destiny that awaited their species among the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Sung asked one day. "What we did to our world?" Tay thought for a long time before answering. "Every day. But I regret the alternative more. If we had done nothing, there would be no regrets, because there would be no one left to feel them." Seung nodded. She understood. In a small school, in what had once been Korea, a woman named Oh Yuri taught history to young students. She had been the little girl in Haven 12, the one who had asked Ground Commander Park Sua if they would be okay. Now she was grown, and she told her students about the people who had saved them. She told them about Admiral Tay, who had commanded the battle from beneath a mountain. She told them about Dr. Kang, who had built the impossible weapon. She told them about President Yoon, who had made the hardest decision in human history. And she told them about Sua, the teacher who had become a soldier. The soldier who had died at her post so that the weapon could fire one last time. The hero who had asked nothing for herself except that the children survive. Remember them, Yuri told her students. Not because we want to make more wars, but because they showed us what we are capable of when we have no other choice. They showed us that humanity does not surrender, we adapt, we fight, we survive. The students listened. They were the first generation born after the fall. They would carry this lesson forward to their children and their children's children until the end of time. In the laboratories of Project New Dawn, Choi Yuna continued Dr. Kang's work. The graviton technology that had moved Earth was being refined, made more efficient, made controllable. If we can move one planet, she told her team, we can move others. We can terraform worlds. We can build habitats in deep space. We can become a species that exists everywhere and nowhere. Impossible to contain, impossible to destroy. It was Dr. Kang's dream. She would make it real. The Galactic Council had granted humanity membership, but they watched nervously. The other species could not forget what Earth had done. They saw humans as dangerous, now unpredictable, capable of anything, willing to sacrifice everything for survival. Some species sent ambassadors and trade delegations, hoping to build peaceful relationships. Others kept their distance, afraid of what might happen if they offended the species that had turned a planet into a weapon. Admiral Tay thought this was fine. Fear was not respect, but it was a start, and fear kept them honest. Near Saturn, a patrol ship captured a Voral survivor. He was one of 17 who had escaped the battle, drifting in a damaged vessel for months before being found. He was brought to Earth for questioning. Admiral Tay agreed to meet with him personally. He did not know why he wanted to. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps a need to understand the enemy he had defeated. The Voral was kept in a secure room, watched by guards. When Tay entered, the alien looked up at him with eyes that held neither hatred nor fear, only exhaustion. "I remember your ship," the Voral said. "The small one at the center of the mountain facility. You gave the orders that day." "I did," Tay said. "We came to cleanse your world of vermin. We had done it many times before, to many species. It was supposed to be simple." The Voral paused. "What are you? What kind of species does this? What kind of creatures turn their own home into a weapon?" Tay sat down across from him. He thought of everything that had happened. The years of war, the deaths of his sons, the activation of Homefall, the millions who had died so that billions could live. "We are human," he said finally. We are the species that, when hope died, made our home into a fist. The Voral stared at him. And now? What will you do now that you have won? We will live, Tay said. We will rebuild. We will explore and learn and grow. We will never start a war, but we will also never be victims again. He stood up. You and your people tried to erase us from the universe. You failed. Now you will go back to your dominion and tell them what happened here. Tell them what we did. Tell them what we are capable of when we are pushed to the edge. He walked to the door, then paused and looked back. And tell them to remember this. We did not want this fight. We did not choose this war. But when you came for our children and our homes and our future, we found a way to fight back. We always will. That is what it means to be human. He left the room. The Voral sat alone, thinking about what he had heard, thinking about what he would tell his people. Outside, the sun rose over Earth's new horizon. It was smaller and dimmer than it used to be, but it was still beautiful, still warm, still a reminder that even in the darkness, light could be found. The planet that had fallen armed from the heavens now floated peacefully among the stars. It was scarred and changed and forever different from what it had been, but it was home, it was alive, and it was free. In the schools, children learned the stories of the heroes who had saved them. In the shipyards, engineers built vessels that would carry humanity to distant worlds. In the fields and factories and homes, people lived their lives with a new appreciation for what they had almost lost. The war was over. The long dawn had begun. And somewhere in the vast expanse of the galaxy, other civilizations looked toward the small blue planet that had refused to die. They did not understand humans. They did not know how to feel about them, but they would never forget them. The species that moved their world. The species that fought back with their own home. The species that, when given no hope, created their own humanity. The universe would remember that name.